On today's show, what's the latest with Luka Doncic's injury? What can we expect with him out? And do the Mavericks have a Luka problem, or is it just a roster problem? We'll talk about that and more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Mavericks, NBA champions. Bang! It's good, and the Mavericks have won the game.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On Mavs your first listen each and every day and every post game, even when Kyrie posts first before us. We are free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. But the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day and to comment anything below. Let us know. Do you think the Mavericks have a Luka problem or a roster problem? We may have to explain that one to you a little bit. So
probably
stick with us. Joining me as always, my co-host, writer, contributor at Mavs.com, the injury instigator, the one more thinking. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
I realized I just talked during the intro. Somebody wrote us the other day and said, Isaac, you ruined the intro because you talked. So I'm sorry for talking. And that, I texted somebody today and I said, Luka's hurt. Kyrie's on Twitch. Things are going great over here. And but no, it's we at least got a good injury update, and yeah, we good.
You gotta love when listeners respond, and
They're discussing the podcast.
It's gonna be your favorite.
Oh, my favorite new drop.
They're discussing the podcast.
From the Warriors-Grizzlies game tonight when Draymond and Dylan Brooks got into it. But on today's show, we'll talk about Luka Doncic. We got an update on his injury, and so we have a little bit more idea of what to expect over the next coming weeks here, sort of. And then we will talk about a big question that I have personally is, do the Mavericks have a Luka problem or a roster problem? I have this take I've been workshopping, and I need to workshop with Isaac a little bit more, but I'm not sure I'm fully bought into it. So stick with us on that. Luka Doncic, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, got an MRI on his thigh, and it's clean. That's positive. We'll take that. Anytime it's clean, comes back it's negative, that's great. Expected to return as soon as discomfort allows him, sources tell ESPN. So I would think that overall this is a positive because there's no timetable on it really. And it's just probably pain management, which is probably the reason why he was playing in this game.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he, something's been up with him over the past few games, and just to see him limping around out there, at the beginning of that Pelicans game, then he was out, and just like he did, and his reaction after the game, that was kind of worrisome because sometimes, a lot of times he just kind of downplays it, but he didn't really downplay it that much after the game. But yeah, super awesome news that you wish that the Mavericks are in a better spot in the standings, that you could say, hey, we are Memphis or we're Sacramento. And it's like, you can just take off, a few weeks here, get fully healthy. But, if Luka takes off, or I should say takes off, if Luka has to miss, 2 weeks or something like that, then, they really can't afford to drop into standings.
Yeah, and that's the reason why he was playing in that Pelicans game. I talked about it after the game. I said, well, why, if he was dealing with this, why was he playing in the game? Well, the answer is they need these games. He has to play in these games because they need to. Everything is so stacked up in the West right now. The Mavericks are now in 8th right now after the games tonight, and they're a game and a half out of the play-in, out of the play-in, not even just to stay in it. So the Mavericks it's really all tight right there, and they need every game that they can get. And so if Luka could play, if it's just pain management, then then they decided that he was going to play. Obviously, the injury has now got a little bit worse, so I expect him to be out a week and then try to evaluate it. That's what he said after the game, and so I'm going to kind of take a cue from him and see what happens, which means that Luka would miss the next 2 Grizzlies games, which John Morant is going to miss those 2 games as well for the Grizzlies.
And Steven Adams and Brandon Clark. They've got issues over there. Mavericks have issues. They have issues. But
One of them is on the road. One of them is at home. And then they play the Spurs next Wednesday, the 15th. And I expect Luka to probably miss that game as well. Mavericks should be able to win that game without Luka. But that's the next stretch of games that the Mavericks are probably going to be without Luka, is my guess.
Yeah, and reminder, Memphis just beat Golden State. Even without their guys, they're going to be locked and loaded.
Hold on, it's Golden State on the road though. So Golden State on the road is a very different team than at home.
They'll still be locked and loaded. They'll have a shot. They'll be lasered in on the Mavs, and they'll be watching them in the standings there. But they need that. The Mavs need that. Need at least one of those games. Do at least get one of those games. But the San Antonio game, don't care. I do care, but they should beat that team without Luka pretty easy.
Let's talk about what this team will look like without Luka, because I think that it could be a little interesting. I expect them to, one, push the tempo. I expect them to play with some pace. I think this is probably a prime opportunity to get Josh Green some more confidence and to try and get him some more shots. It's just so different, the Josh Green that we saw in these last couple of games and the Josh Green we saw right after the trade, where he was driving and finishing floaters and taking pull-up jumpers. And we just haven't seen that Josh Green. He's either lost his confidence because he lost some minutes or hitting a slump, or it could be either of them. He's a young player and that stuff happens. But what do you think about those two things with the Mavericks over these next couple of games, possibly without Luka?
Well, it starts with Kyrie, and I was thinking the other day, I was like, is this the, obviously this isn't a shot towards the Mavs here, but is this going to be the worst roster outside of Luka that Kyrie's having to carry?
Oh no! You do not remember the Cleveland Cavaliers when LeBron was gone.
Since that's what I was going for. Since those Cleveland days, because I was thinking about it, I was like, even if Kevin Durant was out, he had Harden there for a little bit. Even in Boston, if Tatum was out, Jaylen Brown was there, and some other guys, and it's all right, because I was thinking I'm like, man, if Luka's out for a stretch here, we don't know how long it's going to be. When was the last time Kyrie's carried a team like this and saying, all right, I got this, I gotta carry the team?
The Nets without KD this season, probably. Yeah, I mean that's the last
Ben
time.
Simmons, he's but no, it starts with Kyrie. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about Josh in the next few segments, but he's been in a slump. You gotta figure out, once they made the Kyrie trade and Dorian had to be in that trade, the natural thing that, we were saying that the day they made the trade, hey, we were joking. It's Nico's going to say, and Mark or somebody's going to be it's Josh Green's time. It's ready for him to step up into the Dorian role and all that. And it was like clockwork. They were saying the same thing, hey, Josh, he's ready for this moment, all this stuff. And he's kind of been on a slump and, over the past, a little bit here. So he's got to figure some things out. Or else it's really going to make him, think long and hard about, Justin Holiday minutes of saying, well, at least Justin Holiday is going to stand out there and rain threes from the corner. But the best version of this team is Josh Green continuing to evolve into that two-way guy that can bring a ton of energy and start alongside Kyrie and Luka.
And we've talked about this year. He's been better as a player next to one ball handler instead of the third guy next to two ball handlers, because he can add that little bit of extra stuff, which is one of the reasons why we were kind of okay with him being brought off the bench. Now his minutes still needed to be, higher than they were when kids started bringing him off the bench, but he's good in that role because he does give you a little bit more ball handling, a little bit more ball movement and passing and all that kind of stuff. Do you want to hear the roster in Cleveland his rookie year?
I was about to ask you.
19-year-old Kyrie Irving played 51 games that year. 35-year-old Antoine Jamison scoring 17 points.
A steal.
Scoring 17 points a game. 36-year-old Anthony Parker started all 51 games that he played for that team. Omri Caspi started 35 games.
Wow.
That's the number 4 player that started the 4th most games for that Cavs team. Alonzo G started 31 games. 25-year-old Anderson Varejao. 20-year-old young Tristan Thompson started 25 games for that team.
Pre-Kardashian.
And so that's probably the worst roster that Kyrie's had.
It's tough.
That's brutal. Even that next year, I guess they got Dion Waiters roster's still kind of the same. So coming up, I got a question. Do the Mavericks have a Luka problem or a roster problem? I'll explain what I mean by that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about BetterHelp. Everybody has things in their life that you just need to talk about. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp, and this show is brought to you by BetterHelp because they can help you. They can provide the help that you need. They can provide someone to talk to you. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing. We're always changing. The person, I was just talking to my wife about this tonight. The person that I was at 22 years old is different than the person I am at 30 years old. Like I'm just a completely different person in a lot of ways. And I have different problems and different things that I need to talk out. We're constantly being like thrown new things at us and smartphones. And all of a sudden we know everything that's happening all over the world instantly. This is something that that people need to talk about. And so I think everybody could benefit from this. Go ahead and go to betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month to talk to somebody. There's all kinds of great things with it. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. You can just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist that'll work for you, that has dealt with the things that you want to talk about. So that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, Isaac Harris, let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks and if they have a Luka problem or a roster problem. Now, I started to workshop this because I think part of it is true. I think the Dallas Mavericks, to an extent, do have a Luka problem in the sense that a lot of teams have a star problem when their star player gets to be about this age, right? Think about kind of LeBron. Harden, definitely. Westbrook. Think about some of these stars we've seen that at a certain age, you're just like, okay, like the stars getting a little unhappy, or they're at a point, they're hitting a wall in their career where some of their flaws are just being exposed because they're on a higher stage. They're being held to a higher level of scrutiny and all that. Luka Doncic is dealing with an injury, wants to play, he plays. Nobody tells him not to. Not sure if that's only on him or on the team as well, but that's a thing. Luka Doncic wants to pound the rock, go score, go do his thing. The offense has not changed. The coach has not changed anything. Not sure if that's 100% on Luka or 100% on the coaches. These are 100% on Luka. His physical shape at this point in his career, it has not gotten better. I don't think his physicality has gotten better, or his conditioning has gotten better at this point in his career. His complaining to the refs and whining has reached an all-time high this season, and there's a lot of people complaining about the refs. I mean, you ask Fred VanVleet, and he's got that was incredible. He's got a few choice words in his back pocket,
especially for Ben Taylor too. I'm like, I'm all here for the Ben Taylor slander.
Luka was sitting at home going, "That's right, that's exactly right." Like,
he's like texting Nico saying, "Hey, is Fred a free agent?"
He is actually. He's going to be a free agent. And so the complaining to the refs has reached an all-time high. Jason Kidd calls him out in the media in front of all of us. And the next game, Luka gets another technical. So he gets called out, or people in his life have talked to him about this, and nothing changes. So can the Mavericks talk to Luka? Is there somebody in his life or in the Mavericks that can speak to Luka, get him to change, coach him, all that? I think he's a coachable player. But we're getting to a point where some of these things are becoming such big issues that they're hurting the Mavericks overall. I mean, his effort level at times has been really bad this season, and they need some of that to be fixed if they want to take the next step.
Dude, you must have Luka fans in shambles in the comments right now on YouTube.
But then I look at this problem and I say, okay, there's all these problems that I just mentioned, and a lot of them are with Luka. There's so much is being asked of Luka this season, and this is why I asked the question, do they have a Luka problem or a roster problem? If the Mavericks had a slightly better roster, just 2 more rotation players, honestly, that's all they need. They traded 2 away. They could just get 2 more back and have 2 more rotation players with Luka and Kyrie. They would win more games, and we would be talking about how this team plays instead of why this team plays bad. Like, it would just be a completely different conversation that we're talking about, because they would be winning a little bit more if their roster was just a little bit better. Luka has to do so much. He's asked to do all these things because they're covering up for the roster. Kyrie, same thing. His offense has to be almost perfect for the Mavericks to get wins now because they're overcoming so much on the other end. Isaac Harris, I asked you the question, do the Mavericks have a Luka problem from all the things I mentioned before, or do they have a roster problem because of the state of the roster right now, and Luka and Kyrie also having to cover up all that stuff?
Do I have to pick one, or can I say both?
I heed the floor.
Do I have to pick one?
You can be your own person.
Oh, they're talking.
If I have to pick one, I'll pick the roster problem. I think that's the bigger problem. I think that's the bigger issue. And I think Luka obviously knows that too. I mean, Tim McMahon, put that in his story, back when reporting on the Kyrie story, a few weeks ago, of Luka pushed him to make that trade. Like, Luka wanted another star in here really bad.
Yep.
And that was kind of the first, I know, Mark tried to deny that afterwards and all this stuff, because it was kind of the first time that we've seen like Luka really proactively, at least being, fully reported on that, hey, Luka's like pushing for this team to, like, there's no off years at this point. He's pressuring
them. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I want to be in the mix here. I think it's also to think of, look at all he's accomplished in his career at the age that he is.
Right.
He just had a birthday the other day, and you start looking at all this stuff that he's accomplished at, just this young age. And if like, dude, from the all NBA first teams, I mean, that's just ridiculous how many he already has in his belt. Like the dude can legitimately, I mean, how many guys in NBA history can you say at the age of 24 could retire and they would be in the Hall of Fame? There's not, I mean, I don't even know how many people you could say that with, but
Magic Johnson had won a couple titles by then.
Yeah, because you obviously with Luka, you tie in his international play too.
Right.
It's like, but still, I mean, looking at his NBA resume and all that stuff. So in a way, you kind of don't blame him for setting back and saying, dude, I've already made it to a conference finals. I'm in MVP convo every year. I'm dang near leading the league in scoring. So it's like you kind of see all that, because I try to look bigger picture of Luka's career sometimes, and I ask myself, I'm like, man, what is he going to go down as? Is he going to go down, because he's already a Hall of Famer? Okay, so like, what is he going to go down as? Is he going to go down as a what if of? That you ask yourself years down the road, 15 years down the road, or 10 years down the road, because he pulls up Barry Sanders and retires early. And it's like, dude, I've had fun. I made a lot of money. I'm going back on to play with Real Madrid, and I'm just going to do my thing over there. And that we sit there and say, oh my gosh. I mean, even like the LeBron, thing, when LeBron passed Kareem, and, Luka was asked about it, and Luka's like, I'm not going to pass him.
I'm not going to play that long.
I'm not going to play that long, like, so you have to, I kind of asked that, you put all of these things together of the JJ Barea interview with, JJ Redick. It's like, man, at some point he's going to take it serious. He's just so young and all this. He's so naturally gifted. And if you've ever, if somebody's listened to this and it's like, you have something in your life that you're naturally gifted at, and from a young age that you've put in time on it, but it's just something like, man, I've just been really good at that. It's kind of easy to neglect it at the same time too, because you are so naturally gifted at it, to recognize that there's still another level that you can go at if you want to be one of the best at that natural gift. And I think that's the spot that Luka has got to be asking himself at some point of, hey, do I want to be in the GOAT conversation when this is all done? Like, not the all-time ranks, but like, do I want to walk away from this with multiple rings and all this stuff? Then it's going to take a shift in diet. It's going to take a shift in maturity with refereeing and all that stuff. It's going to take probably a shift with your defensive intensity and some of that stuff. And so some of that stuff's going to shift, if he wants to reach that level. But at the same time, he's looking at saying, dude, I'm like, my midway tier, if we want to say that, or my 80% of what I could be is higher than almost everybody in the league. So I'm saying all that because I don't think that's the biggest issue. The biggest issue is the roster. And the biggest issue is the team around him. Do they know the type of team around him that can win multiple titles?
We agree that
there you go.
There's the pod. There you go.
Oh, and they're talking. They're discussing the podcast.
I feel like I just said a lot of words that meant absolutely nothing, or I just talked in a circle, or it actually made sense. I have no clue.
I think you talked in a circle, but made your point at the beginning and then came back to your point at the end. So I think it worked.
because they're both problems.
They are,
It's
right?
It's just a matter of which one is bigger. And I wanted to defend because the Luka thing is a problem, but I don't think it's as big as the other one.
Coming up, let's talk about why the roster is such a problem and why it's holding the Mavericks back as bad as it is. We'll talk about that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is the betting partner for the Locked On Podcast Network, and it's the number one sportsbook in America. You can go and bet on some teams right now. You can go check and see what's available for you. The no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So if you wanted to try it, this is your time to do it. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, see what's available for you. Let's check out sixth man of the year. Malcolm Brogdon, plus 110. Emmanuel Quickly, minus 140. So they have them in the wrong order, but the Emmanuel Quickly is the favorite here. Norman Powell, plus 3,600. Bobby Portis, plus 5,000. Malik Monk. Christian Wood. You can get odds on Christian Wood right now, plus 24,000. You put down $100.
Pentax, tell me which one.
You put down $100. Christian Wood somehow wins sixth man of the year. You win $24,000. That would be an insane bet at this point. But he is listed on there. So you can go check that out at FanDuel. Again, go to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, Isaac Harris, we're asking a big question. Did the Mavericks have a Luka problem or a roster problem? We do agree that both of these things are problems, that there are issues with Luka this season. But I think one of the reasons why some of these issues with Luka have been so expanded, so scrutinized, so looked upon, so enlarged, so magnified, is that I just went Stephen A. Smith there. I just think a bunch of adjectives in a row because this roster is so bad around Luka right now, and that they're dealing with so many just specific holes around it, with a team that has Luka Doncic on it. Let's start.
And can I say this real quick too? One more thing.
Next time, don't wait till it's 3 seconds left to talk.
The best players in the league get held to a higher standard because I feel like some people it never fails. Anytime we talk about Luka in this light, there's somebody that's going to comment and be like, well, Tim can't play defense. Why don't you talk about that? And it's like,
that's right.
We're just talking about the Luka angle of this because you look at all the stars across the league. They've all been held to a higher standard and all been criticized to a degree. Giannis, can you make free throws? And you know what it took? Giannis making a ton of free throws in the freaking finals to shut some people up. Jokic, can he play defense? Can, just go across the league? I mean, Steph Curry, is he big enough? Can he play defense? Can he do all this stuff as they started to enter into that prime of their career? You could go with a bunch of these stars that you're gonna take criticism. There's areas that's gonna hold you back that you got to improve on if you want to be at that level and win titles.
Kevin Durant has still not gotten over the criticism that he has taken for being a bus driver or whatever. He had a comment the other day about the Inside the NBA guys that were saying, well, if I go win a title with Scoot Henderson, then they'll finally be happy. That's what it would have to take for me. Giannis, there was a real take at one point before Giannis won the title that, Giannis is a Scottie Pippen. Right? That.
Chris Middleton's their best player.
Yeah, these are the things that we're talking about at this point. And Luka is now getting that criticism because he's hitting the age where there starts to become expectations. It's no longer, this is why at the end of that run last year, you and I looked at each other and I think we said this on the podcast that, man, that was super fun, but now here comes the expectations. And next season's going to be so much harder because they're going to be expected to win and not just the plucky underdog that is this fun team that, is rising up and they weren't favored over the Suns, over the Warriors. And so it was we're just happy to be here and happy that we won that Sun series. And now here we are. And now this team has expectations. And so it's different. You're held to a higher level.
And if Denver wins the title this year, Jokic is not going to be getting targeted every single time in a pick and roll and just getting obliterated every time. If they win the title, you're going to be able to look at it and say, man, he got better over the past few years in isolation defense, and he was able to hold his own. He's still going to get beat at times, but he was able to hold his own defensively. And just like the Giannis and free throws and how he shut people up hitting free throws and stuff in the finals, you could look back at some of these stars and how they got better and how even the small areas improvements and all the greatness they have, that you can still look back and look in these areas of improvement that they made for them to cross over into the title world. But the bigger problem in this is the roster, like we said.
We had a we had to take, I was looking at some of my old videos today. We had to take January 2021. Luka Doncic has become a good defender. In 2021, January 2021, we had that take. That was before the second Clippers series. And I'm saying this, I'm bringing this up because we've seen Luka be a better defender. We've seen Luka be a fine defender, hold his own on defense, have good hands, know where to be a big body that guys just can't push around, like and not just fall asleep at the wheel on defense. It's one of the reasons why it's standing out so much this year, because we have seen him play some solid defense in the past.
Isolation defense, he can play well.
Yeah.
It's the getting beat back, back door. It's the closing out. It's the angles on stuff. It's the help defense. It's all that stuff that he's got to have more effort on. But when he locks in isolation wise, he's not that bad of a defender.
Yeah. But one of the reasons why it stands out so bad is because this Mavericks team does have a roster problem, right? We've talked about the defense. We've talked about, one of the reasons why some people have asked me, like, okay, why does this Mavericks team, the defense is so much worse than last year when the personnel really hasn't changed that much? Well, when you look at the personnel, it has changed. It's not just Dorian leaving, which was a big hit, but this Mavericks team went from 110 offensive rating to our defensive rating last year, which was 8th in the NBA, to 116th and 23rd in the NBA. And it's been worse over the last couple of weeks here. So they lose Dorian, obviously. Maxey has been out for a long time. Remember, Josh Green had an injury. He's had a couple injuries this year that he's dealt with, and he's been out. Reggie Bullock, I think, has taken a step back this season.
Two guys that are not great defenders that have basically been put in the rotation is Tim Hardaway and Christian Wood. Tim missed a lot of the season last year, so
that's what it comes down to, is that you change out Dorian and Maxey for Christian Wood and Tim Hardaway Jr., and your defense is going to be demonstrably worse, right? Like that's the big change, because and that's one of the reasons why the Mavericks are struggling. And you tried to get JaVale McGee, which was a big weakness before, even when the defense was top 10. That was a big weakness of this team. Tried with JaVale McGee, hasn't worked, isn't going to work. And then now you have a bigger hole than you did before because of the Maxey injury and all that.
I thought you were going to keep going. No. Sorry. Okay, so one of the things I want to bring up about the roster thing was, for the longest time on this podcast, you've been listening to this show, then you're like, oh, wow, yes, y'all have said this a million times, was we were
at media day. Jalen Brunson told us.
So we talked to Brunson last media day, and
they're talking. They're discussing the podcast.
But we used to say, how many times have we said on this podcast, man, we're a believer in the role players. They just need a number two.
Yep.
Like, it's just the top end. They need a number two behind Luka. And like Dorian, Brunson and Maxey and these guys, like they're great role players. They just need a number two. Well, guess what's happened? They got a great number two now. And now we're looking at the role players, 3 through 7, saying, all right, well, what's going on? Like, what can we have the best of both worlds? Is that possible?
No.
And you just start looking across the league at other. I know Kyrie doesn't like to use this word, because he told me was the duo word. And
it's great. It's great, dude. Dude, it's great. It's great. It's great, broski. Bro, name it. It's great. It's great. It's great, bro. It's great. It's great. It's great. This life's great, bro. I have no complaints. I don't.
I waited till 28 minutes in the podcast to bring that one out.
I was so unprepared for that.
That was from Kyrie's Twitch stream today. He had some good ones in there. And and Kyrie's Twitch stream, he's mostly just complaining about the way the world works. There wasn't really anything Mavs related in it. So,
you look at some other duos across the league, and it's like you look at some of their role players, and they've just hit on some of those. And we went through a lot of stuff with the role players for the Mavs right now. But from Josh's slump to Maxey's health, and go across the board. But it's like you look at like Boston, and you look at some of the guys they have around, Tatum and Jaylen Brown. You look around, you just look at other duos, even like the Clippers, and you're like, all right, you start looking at some of these vets they have around them and how they fit and stuff. And
the Clippers and Celtics are sitting guys the Mavericks would start right now. Robert Covington, Grant Williams have sat DNP CDs, and the Mavericks would start them probably.
Yeah, and like Phoenix, Phoenix is a little harder because whatever. But
they just made a 2-for-1 trade as well. Lost Jay Crowder and all that.
Yeah, so it's just it's like they're collectively, it's like health, Josh Green slump, Reggie Bullock, and another year older, but also, he did play 45 minutes for a whole playoff stretch too.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Last year. You look at depth stuff. Dwight Powell is still starting as a center in the year of our Lord. But
I stand by our comments for years that the role players were good and that the Mavericks, just needed a number 2. The problem is you lose Brunson for nothing. Huge catastrophic loss. It's becoming a bigger loss to their chemistry and their overall the vibes than we ever thought. Because you look at the difference between the Knicks this year and the Mavericks this year. You lose Dorian. That's like a 40-minute per game role player that you're losing now. That's a huge loss too. And Dinwiddie. You go from Dinwiddie to Kyrie, and that's a big upgrade for the Mavericks. But you lose those 2 other role players for and then all of a sudden and Maxi's been injured, and so then you're just way down now. And then the role players don't look as good.
What's wild though is you didn't really go from Dinwiddie to Kyrie. You went from Dinwiddie and Brunson to Kyrie because you didn't get anything from Brunson. So imagine this team with Dinwiddie coming off the bench and Dorian still on the team and Maxey healthy.
I honestly think
because that's the team who made the playoff run basically, and Kyrie's in the starting in that Brunson spot, and it's like that. We'd be really impressed right now. But
I honestly think if they had just run it back from last year, if for some reason Jalen Brunson changes his mind and wants to stay, I think, or if the Mavericks had signed him to the extension before, I think by the time the season ended, he was ready to go. But, no one will ever agree on that ever, not even Rick Brunson. If they had just run the team back from last year, maybe add Christian Wood, maybe you don't. That team is number 2 in the West right now. I think that team, because they knew what they were, Brunson would take the step forward. He was already taking
continuity, baby.
They knew the defense. Jason Kidd wouldn't be looked at as bad because he had defensive players that he could use. That's one of the big things.
The Christian Wood trade still happens.
That's what I said. You could do it or you couldn't. Maybe you add Christian Wood as some extra offensive punch that team did need. And I think that team would be number 2 in the West right now, and we'd be looking at, okay, who are we playing? Who's coming out of that play-in? Are we going against the Lakers? Is it going to be Timberwolves? Who knows? And because the West has just been so bad this year.
I mean, it's going to, not the end of the pod on a bad note, but what if Brunson signed the extension? Because that's the biggest what if for me. It's not the offseason, them going to a number and all that stuff. It's the what if they offered Brunson an extension. That's going to be one of the biggest what if. We've done what ifs every offseason, and that might be a podcast for a lot of you guys. I
don't think we'll do it this year.
Too soon.
Too soon. Because at this point, the state of the Mavericks.
It's great, dude. It's great. It's great, broski. Bro, name it. It's great. It's great, bro. It's great. This.
One more thing.
Oh.
Next time, don't wait till it's 3 seconds left to top.
Let's end it on a positive note, though.
Okay.
Here's a chance for Kyrie and some of these role players to really get on a good roll. If Luka misses a few games, you go out. I mean, we're sitting here halfway joking about, state of the Mavericks and all this stuff. Dude, they beat Philly, and we're like, this is awesome.
Almost beat the Suns. Luka had a bad game.
They could go out over this next stretch of games and win, 3 other next 4, and fans are getting hyped. We're looking at, Kyrie, even more chemistry with the guys. They're playing super fast paced. They're, having, the defense maybe it's getting a little better. There's some stuff that I'm trying.
Defense getting better. Wow.
I'm just saying, this could be an opportunity that, Luka gets some rest. And Kyrie and the guys build some chemistry. They get to play their fast pace and get Josh Green out of a slump and kind of shake some things up a little bit. So,
yeah, absolutely. And after that and one dunk the other night, we may see a little bit more.
Party, let's go party.
We may see more of Jaden Hardy, which I think they should because they don't have any other ball handlers outside of him and outside of Kyrie and a little bit of Josh Green. So we will be hanging out with you for the rest of the season, 5 days a week, every single post game. Guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.